The dust-laden wind stung Zara O'Sullivan's eyes as she stood on the porch of her empty home, clutching the crumpled letter that had shattered her world. Fort Worth, Texas had never felt so hostile, the scorching summer of 1875 mirroring the burning betrayal in her heart. Her husband of 5 years, Thomas, had abandoned her for the new schoolteacher, a sophisticated woman from Boston who'd arrived just 3 months prior. The letter, hastily written, explained he'd sold their cattle ranch to a stranger and left her with nothing but the house and a meager sum that wouldn't last through winter. Zara wiped away a tear with the back of her hand, her wedding ring catching the sunlight in cruel mockery. At 26, she had never imagined starting over alone. The sound of approaching hoofbeats broke her reverie, and she quickly composed herself, straightening her faded blue dress. Pride was all she had left. A tall, broad-shouldered man astride a magnificent chestnut stallion approached her gate. He dismounted with the easy grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime in the saddle. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes, piercing blue beneath the brim of a worn Stetson, were alert and assessing. He couldn't be much older than 30. Mrs. O'Sullivan. His voice was deep with a hint of a southern drawl. "Yes," she replied, wary of strangers, especially now, Xavier Nicholson. He removed his hat, revealing sun-bleached brown hair. "I believe I purchased your husband's property." He paused, noticing her reddened eyes but respectfully avoiding comment. "I was told you might still be here." Zara stiffened. "As you can see, I am. I have until the end of the month before I need to vacate." Xavier shifted uncomfortably. "Madam, I didn't realize the situation when I bought the ranch. Your husband implied you were both moving east together. Did he now?" Bitterness crept into her voice. "Well, Mr. Nicholson, my husband has moved east with Miss Harrington, the schoolteacher. I learned of this development only this morning." She held up the letter, then immediately regretted revealing so much to a stranger. Xavier's expression darkened. "I see." He placed his hat back on his head. "That changes things." "How so?" "I don't make a habit of turning women out of their homes, especially under such circumstances." He gestured to the surrounding land. "This is good cattle country. I intend to expand what your husband started." "It was my dream too," Zara said softly, "before Thomas decided I wasn't enough." Xavier studied her for a long moment. "Do you know ranching, Mrs. O'Sullivan?" "I've worked this land alongside my husband for 5 years, Mr. Nicholson. I can rope, brand, and drive cattle as well as any man." A hint of admiration flickered in his eyes. "Then perhaps we can come to an arrangement. I need help getting established and you need—" He trailed off, seeming unsure how to continue without causing offense. "I need to survive," Zara finished for him. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Employment, fair wages." "You know this land better than I do. I could use your expertise while you decide your next steps." He paused. "The ranch house has plenty of room. You could stay there until you figure things out." Zara's pride bristled. "I don't accept charity, Mr. Nicholson." "It's not charity if you're earning your keep." His eyes met hers steadily. "And it's Xavier." She considered his offer. The alternatives were few, moving to her sister's crowded home in San Antonio, seeking employment as a housekeeper or cook in town, or marrying the first willing man she met. None appealed to her. "Very well," she finally said. "I accept your offer temporarily, but I'll stay in the foreman's cabin, not the main house." Xavier nodded. "That's agreeable." He extended his hand. "Partners then, at least for now." Zara hesitated before taking it. His hand was warm and calloused, a working man's hand. "Partners," she agreed, wondering if she was making another mistake. The next morning dawned clear and hot. Zara packed her modest belongings into a single trunk. The house that had been her home for 5 years now felt like a stranger's dwelling. Thomas had taken little with him, but his absence was everywhere. Xavier arrived with a wagon at precisely 9 o'clock. He loaded her trunk with ease, then offered his hand to help her onto the seat. She ignored it, climbing up unassisted. "Stubborn," he murmured, not unkindly. "Independent," she corrected. The journey to what was now the Nicholson ranch took less than an hour. Zara felt a pang seeing the familiar landscape, knowing it no longer belonged to her. The ranch house came into view, a solid two-story structure her husband had built with such pride. Nearby stood the smaller foreman's cabin, which would now be her home. "I had Mrs. Rivera from town come out and clean the cabin yesterday," Xavier explained as they approached. "She stocked some basic provisions, too." Zara was surprised by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you." They unloaded her trunk at the cabin, which was simple but clean. A small bedroom, a combination kitchen and sitting area, and a covered porch facing the main house. "It would do." "I'd like to ride the property today," Xavier said. "See what I've bought. Would you be willing to show me around?" Zara nodded. "I'll change and meet you at the stables in 20 minutes. When she emerged in her riding skirt and boots, Xavier was already saddling 2 horses. He'd chosen Maple, her favorite mare, and Zara was touched he'd somehow known. "The ranch hands mentioned she was yours," he explained, noticing her expression. "They'll be returning tomorrow. I gave them a few days off during the change in ownership." They rode out under the expansive Texas sky, Zara pointing out water sources, the best grazing areas, and places where the fencing needed repair. Xavier asked intelligent questions and listened carefully to her answers. He was clearly no novice to ranching. "Where are you from?" she asked as they paused atop a rise overlooking the western pasture. "Originally Virginia, but I've been in Texas since right after the war," he replied. "Had a small spread near Laredo, but I wanted to expand. When I heard this place was for sale, it seemed ideal. How did you afford it?" The question slipped out before she could stop herself. "I apologize, that's not my business." Xavier didn't seem offended. "My father died last year, left me an inheritance I didn't expect. I decided to invest it in something with a future." They continued riding, and Zara found herself relaxing slightly in Xavier's company. He was direct but not overbearing, confident but not arrogant. As sunset approached, they turned back toward the ranch. The golden light bathed the landscape, making even the familiar seem new. Zara felt a curious mixture of loss and possibility. "Your husband was a fool," Xavier said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Startled, Zara turned to him. "Excuse me, to leave all this." He gestured at the land around them. "And you." The last words were spoken so quietly she almost didn't hear them. Before she could respond, he urged his horse forward, leaving her to follow with a confused frown. The next weeks fell into a rhythm. Zara worked from sunup to sundown, grateful for the exhaustion that let her sleep without dreaming. Xavier proved to be a fair employer, treating her with the same respect he showed the male ranch hands. He valued her opinion and often sought her advice. One evening, as August was giving way to September, Zara was mending a tear in her work shirt on the porch of her cabin when Xavier approached, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "Thought you might want this," he said, offering her one. "It's cooling off tonight." She accepted the cup with a nod of thanks. He hesitated, then gestured to the empty chair beside her. "May I? It's your ranch," she said, but softened the words with a small smile. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Xavier finally said. "The cattle count seems low compared to what was in the sale agreement. Do you know anything about that?" Zara sighed. "I suspected as much. Thomas sold off nearly a third of the herd before he left. I assume he used the money to start his new life." The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. She thought she'd moved past the worst of her anger. Xavier's jaw tightened. "That complicates things. I was counting on those cattle for breeding and to establish my reputation at the spring auctions." "I'm sorry," Zara said automatically, then caught herself. "Though I don't know why I'm apologizing for his actions." "You shouldn't be." Xavier turned to look at her directly. "You've been wronged, Zara, by your husband, and if I'm being honest, by me too. I bought this place without asking enough questions." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something about the way he said it made her heart skip. What will you do? She asked. Adapt, work harder, maybe look into getting a loan to buy more stock. He shrugged. I've faced worse challenges. Zara hesitated, then said, I have some money saved, not much, but enough to buy maybe 20 head. Xavier looked surprised. That's generous, but I couldn't accept. It would be an investment, she clarified, not a gift. We could draw up papers. I'd get a percentage of the profits from those cattle and their offspring. He studied her thoughtfully. You're a businesswoman, Mrs. O'Sullivan. I'm a survivor, Mr. Nicholson. The next day, they rode into Fort Worth to see the bank manager and a notary. The small town was bustling with activity supply wagons loading for cattle drives, merchants hawking their wares, and the constant traffic in and out of the saloons. As they tied their horses outside the bank, Zara noticed a familiar figure across the street. Her stomach dropped. Thomas. And beside him, looking elegant and completely out of place in the dusty street, was Eliza Harrington, the schoolteacher. Xavier noticed her sudden tension. What is it, Thomas? She managed. My husband, ex-husband, and his companion. Xavier's expression hardened as he followed her gaze. Do you want to avoid them? We can come back later. Zara straightened her shoulders. No, I have business to conduct. Unfortunately, Thomas had also spotted them. He looked momentarily startled, then composed himself and crossed the street, Eliza trailing behind him. Zara, he greeted stiffly. I didn't expect to see you in town. Clearly, she replied coldly. I thought you'd be in Boston by now. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Plans changed. We're leaving tomorrow. He glanced at Xavier with obvious curiosity. Zara made no move to introduce them. Thomas O'Sullivan, her former husband finally said, extending his hand to Xavier. Xavier looked at the offered hand with undisguised contempt and made no move to take it. I know who you are, he said coldly. I'm the man who bought your ranch. Thomas lowered his hand awkwardly. Ah, yes. Good property that. Property you had no right to sell entirely on your own, Xavier stated flatly. Half of it belonged to your wife. Thomas flushed. It's exactly how the law sees it, Xavier interrupted. Texas may not be as civilized as Boston, but we do have laws about community property. Eliza Harrington spoke for the first time, her Boston accent pronounced. Thomas assured me all legal matters were properly addressed. Zara looked at the woman who had replaced her. Eliza was beautiful in a delicate, cultured way, with perfect posture and immaculate clothes. Everything Zara was not. Did he also assure you he wouldn't abandon you when someone more interesting came along? Zara asked quietly. The schoolteacher had the grace to look uncomfortable. Thomas's face darkened. We should go, Eliza, this isn't productive. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Zara, I am sorry for how things ended. No, you're not, Zara replied evenly. But someday you will be. After they walked away, Xavier placed a gentle hand on Zara's back. Are you all right? She was surprised to realize she was. Seeing Thomas had hurt less than expected. I'm fine. Let's finish our business. At the bank, they arranged for Zara's investment in the ranch. The bank manager seemed surprised by the arrangement but drafted the necessary papers. As they were leaving, he mentioned that several other ranchers had suffered cattle losses to thieves in recent months. Keep a watchful eye, he advised. They're getting bolder. Xavier nodded grimly. We'll be careful. On the ride back to the ranch, Zara was quiet, processing the encounter with Thomas. Xavier respected her silence, offering company without demands. As the ranch came into view, he finally spoke. Your husband is a fool, Zara. You've said that before, she noted. It bears repeating. He looked at her directly. He gave up gold for dust. The simple statement, delivered with such conviction, caused an unexpected warmth to bloom in her chest. She looked away, unsure how to respond. That night, Zara dreamed not of Thomas, but of Xavier, his steady gaze, his quiet strength. She woke feeling confused and guilty, as if she'd betrayed something. It was too soon for such feelings, she told herself firmly. Her heart was still healing. The following weeks brought new challenges. True to the banker's warning, signs of rustlers appeared on the outer edges of the property. Xavier organized the men into night patrols, and Zara insisted on taking shifts as well, despite his initial reluctance. "I can shoot as well as any man here," she argued, "better than most." "It's not your shooting I question," he'd replied. "It's the danger. These aren't ordinary thieves, Zara. They're desperate men. All the more reason to have every capable person watching," she countered. "This is my investment too, remember," he'd relented, but insisted she patrol only with him or Miguel, his most trusted hand. October brought cooler weather and the first real test of their vigilance. Zara and Xavier were patrolling the north boundary when they heard cattle lowing in distress. They approached cautiously, rifles ready. In the pale moonlight, they could make out 3 figures attempting to cut several cattle from the herd. Xavier signaled for Zara to circle left while he went right, effectively flanking the rustlers. When they were in position, Xavier called out, "Drop your weapons, you're on Nicholson land." The response was immediate, a shot that whistled past his head. Zara fired a warning shot into the air, revealing her position. One of the rustlers turned toward her, raising his gun. Xavier's shot rang out before the man could fire, hitting him in the shoulder. The injured rustler dropped his weapon, howling in pain. His companions, realizing they were outmaneuvered, fled into the darkness. Zara approached the wounded man cautiously, her rifle trained on him. "Don't move," she ordered. The rustler, a young man barely out of his teens, clutched his bleeding shoulder and glared at her. "Ain't right, a woman doing a man's job," he spat. "Ain't right, a man stealing another's cattle," she retorted. "Yet here we are." Xavier arrived, quickly binding the rustler's hands. "Miguel and the others will have heard the shots. They'll be here soon." True to his word, within minutes the rest of their patrol arrived. The wounded rustler was loaded onto a horse to be taken to the sheriff in Fort Worth. As the others left with their prisoner, Xavier turned to Zara, his expression tight with concern. "Are you all right? He could have killed you." "I'm fine," she assured him. "Though I'll admit it was closer than I'd have liked." Without warning, Xavier pulled her into a fierce embrace. "When I saw him aim at you..." His voice was rough with emotion. Zara stiffened in surprise, then gradually relaxed against him, allowing herself to accept the comfort of his arms. His heart pounded against her cheek, and she realized with a start that he was truly afraid for her. "I'm all right," she repeated softly. "Thanks to you." He pulled back slightly, looking down at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, and more surprising still, she wanted him to. Instead, he released her and stepped back. "We should check the herd, make sure none were taken." The moment passed, but something had shifted between them. As they rode side by side, counting cattle in the moonlight, Zara found herself wondering what it would be like to be held by Xavier again, not in fear, but in tenderness. The rustler incident changed things at the ranch. Xavier doubled the night patrols and requested assistance from neighboring ranchers to form a wider vigilance network. The sheriff in Fort Worth, after questioning the captured rustler, warned that a larger gang was operating in the area. "They're organized," he told Xavier during a visit to the ranch. "Not just opportunists, someone's directing them." Xavier nodded grimly. "We'll be ready." As winter approached, Zara found herself spending more evenings at the main house. What began as business discussions over supper gradually evolved into longer conversations by the fire. Xavier was well read for a rancher, and they often debated books they'd both enjoyed. He told her stories of his childhood in Virginia, of the war that had claimed his older brother, and of his dreams for the future. In turn, Zara shared her own history, her parents' journey from Ireland during the potato famine, her childhood in Pennsylvania, and how she'd met Thomas at a church social shortly after moving to Texas with her sister. "He was charming," she admitted one evening, staring into the fire. "Made me feel special. I was 20 when we married, too young to recognize charm isn't the same as character." Xavier's expression was thoughtful. "What would you have done differently, knowing what you know now?" Zara considered the question seriously. I would have insisted on a more equal partnership from the beginning. Thomas always made the decisions, and I let him because that's what wives are supposed to do. She shook her head. I should have trusted my instincts more. And now, do you trust them now? Their eyes met across the room, and Zara felt that familiar flutter in her stomach. I'm learning to, she said softly. The first snow of the season came in early December, unusually heavy for Texas. The ranch was transformed overnight into a white wonderland that demanded new routines and precautions. Cattle needed extra feed and shelter, water troughs required constant attention to prevent freezing, and the danger of rustlers temporarily diminished. On Christmas Eve, Xavier invited Zara to dinner at the main house. She arrived to find the table set elegantly with the good china and a small pine tree decorated with paper stars and popcorn strings in the corner of the sitting room. Mrs. Rivera helped with the decorations, he explained, seeming almost shy. I wanted to make it special. Zara was touched by the effort. It's lovely, Xavier. They enjoyed a feast of roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie. Xavier had even procured a bottle of good wine from Fort Worth. As they sat by the fire after dinner, he handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a red ribbon. Merry Christmas, he said. Zara hesitated. I didn't expect a gift. I don't have anything for you. Your company is gift enough, he assured her. Open it. Inside the package was a beautiful leather-bound journal with her initials embossed on the cover. For your thoughts, Xavier explained. You mentioned once that you used to keep a journal before Thomas said it was a waste of time. The thoughtfulness of the gift, that he had remembered such a small detail from one of their conversations, brought tears to her eyes. It's perfect, she whispered. Thank you. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the fire dance. Outside, snow began falling again, isolating them further from the world. I never thought I'd be here, Zara said eventually. A year ago, my life seemed set. Now everything's different. Xavier looked at her intently. Different better or different worse? She considered the question. Different, clearer. I see things I couldn't see before, including myself. What do you see? His voice was low. A woman who's stronger than she knew, who can stand on her own. She met his gaze, but who doesn't always want to. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibilities. Xavier set his glass down and moved to sit beside her on the sofa. Zara, he began hesitantly, I know it's too soon. You're still healing from betrayal, and I promised myself I wouldn't rush you. But I find myself thinking about you constantly, caring for you more than I should as your employer. Her heart raced. And how should you care for me? He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched her cheek. Like this, he murmured and leaned forward to kiss her. His lips were gentle against hers, questioning rather than demanding. Zara found herself responding, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. The kiss deepened, awakening feelings she'd thought long buried. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. Xavier rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for months, he confessed. Why didn't you? Because you deserved time, space, the chance to choose freely, not out of gratitude or necessity. His consideration touched her deeply. What happens now? She asked. Xavier took her hands in his. Whatever you want, Zara. We can pretend this never happened if that's what you need, or we can see where it leads, taking things slowly. Zara thought of Thomas, of the pain he'd caused her, but found the memory held less power than before. What she felt for Xavier was different, built on respect and genuine understanding rather than infatuation. I'd like to see where it leads, she decided, slowly. His smile was worth any risk. Then that's what we'll do. The new year brought changes to the ranch. With Zara's investment, Xavier purchased additional cattle and expanded operations. Their business relationship evolved alongside their personal one, Zara taking on more responsibility, essentially becoming a partner rather than an employee. They were careful to keep their growing relationship private from the ranch hands, maintaining propriety. Zara continued living in the foreman's cabin, though she spent most evenings at the main house. They shared meals, conversation, and increasingly tender moments, but Xavier never pressed for more than she was ready to give. In February, they traveled to San Antonio for a livestock auction. It was their first trip together beyond Fort Worth, and Zara enjoyed the freedom of being somewhere no one knew their history. They stayed at a respectable hotel in separate rooms, but spent every waking hour together. After the auction, where they successfully purchased a prize bull for breeding, Xavier surprised her with dinner at the finest restaurant in the city. Candlelight softened his features as he watched her across the table. "You're staring," she noted, smiling. "You're beautiful," he replied simply. "And I'm a fortunate man." Later, as they walked back to the hotel under a canopy of stars, Xavier stopped suddenly and turned to her. "I love you, Zara. I think I have since that first day when you stood so proud on your porch, refusing to be broken." The declaration, though not entirely unexpected, still took her breath away. "Xavier, you don't need to say anything," he assured her quickly. "I just wanted you to know, no expectations, no pressure," but Zara had known her own heart for some time now. "I love you too," she said softly. "It frightens me how much." His smile was brilliant in the moonlight. "Why frightening? Because I've been hurt before, because loving someone gives them the power to destroy you." Xavier took her hands in his. "I can't promise I'll never hurt you, Zara, but I can promise I'll never betray you. I'll never leave you. What we build together will be ours, truly equal." His words were exactly what she needed to hear. Standing on tiptoe, she kissed him deeply, uncaring of who might see. Spring brought new calves, green pastures, and increasing boldness from the rustlers who had lain low during winter. In March, a neighboring ranch lost 30 head in a single night. The Ranchers' Association called an emergency meeting in Fort Worth. Xavier and Zara attended together, now openly acknowledged as partners in the Nicholson Ranch. The meeting hall was packed with concerned ranchers, many of whom had suffered losses. Sheriff Davis addressed the crowd. "We believe these thefts are being orchestrated by someone with intimate knowledge of the area and your operations. Someone who can fence large numbers of cattle quickly and discreetly." A rancher called out, "Any suspects?" Sheriff Davis hesitated. "We have our suspicions, but not enough evidence yet for an arrest." After the meeting, Xavier and Zara were approached by William Parker, owner of the largest ranch in the county. "Nicholson," he greeted, then nodded to Zara. "Mrs. O'Sullivan, surprised you haven't been hit yet." "We've been vigilant," Xavier replied, "but we can't keep up the patrols indefinitely. My men are exhausted." Parker lowered his voice. "Word is the sheriff's looking hard at James Conway." Zara frowned. "The cattle broker, but he's been in Fort Worth for years. He's respected." "Which makes him the perfect cover," Parker explained. "He knows every ranch's schedule, their financial situations, which ones can least afford extra security." Xavier considered this. "Does the sheriff have proof?" "Not yet, but Conway's been living well above his means lately. New house in town, fancy clothes, Eastern education for his sons." Parker shrugged. "Just keep your eyes open, that's all I'm saying." On the ride home, Xavier was thoughtful. "Conway's the one who approached Thomas about buying our ranch," he recalled. "Said he had a client interested." "That client was me." "You think Conway is involved in the rustling?" Zara asked, troubled by the idea. "I don't know, but I find it interesting that he specifically connected me with your husband, knowing Thomas was desperate to leave." Zara hadn't considered this angle. "You think he targeted our ranch specifically?" "Maybe, or maybe he just saw an opportunity. Either way, I think we should be extra cautious." Their vigilance was tested the very next week. Xavier had ridden to a neighboring ranch to discuss shared security, leaving Zara to oversee operations. Shortly after midnight, she was awakened by the sound of gunfire. Grabbing her rifle, she rushed outside to see flames rising from one of the distant outbuildings. The ranch hands were already mobilizing, some heading toward the fire, others toward the cattle pens. Miguel rode up, his expression grim. "It's a diversion, Miss Zara. They set fire to the hay barn to draw us away from the herd. How many? She asked, already mounting her horse. At least 6 men, maybe more. Zara made a quick decision. Take 3 men and deal with the fire. I'll take the rest to protect the cattle. Miguel looked hesitant. Mr. Nicholson wouldn't want you in danger. Mr. Nicholson isn't here, she replied firmly. And this is my ranch too. She rode hard with 4 hands toward the eastern pasture where their most valuable cattle were kept. As they approached, they could see dark figures on horseback already cutting out a portion of the herd. Hold your fire unless they shoot first, Zara called to her men. We don't want to hit the cattle. They split into 2 groups, approaching from different directions to surround the rustlers. Zara led her 2 men in a wide arc to block the rustlers' escape route. When they were in position, she fired a shot into the air. This is Zara O'Sullivan of the Nicholson Ranch. Drop your weapons and move away from our cattle. The response was immediate and violent. The rustlers opened fire, bullets whistling through the darkness. Zara and her men took cover behind a rocky outcropping. When I give the signal, fire over their heads, she instructed. Make them think there are more of us. On her count, they unleashed a volley of shots. From the other side of the pasture, the rest of her men did the same. Caught in the crossfire, the rustlers began to retreat, abandoning their attempt to drive off the cattle. As they fled, Zara caught a glimpse of a familiar figure, a man too well dressed for rustling, observing from a distance. When he realized he'd been spotted, he quickly rode away. That was Conway, she murmured to herself, the cattle broker. By the time Xavier returned the next morning, the situation was under control. The hay barn was partially destroyed, but the cattle were safe, and none of the ranch hands had been seriously injured. Zara met him at the gate, her face smudged with soot, exhaustion evident in her posture. What happened? He demanded, dismounting quickly and striding to her side. She explained the night's events, including her sighting of Conway. Xavier listened intently, his expression growing darker by the moment. You could have been killed, he said when she finished, his voice tight with fear and anger. But I wasn't, she pointed out. And neither were our men or our cattle. He pulled her into a fierce embrace. When I think of what could have happened. This is the life we've chosen, she reminded him gently. Ranching isn't safe, Xavier, you know that. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes searching her face. You're right, but that doesn't make it easier to accept the woman I love being in danger. The woman you love can take care of herself, she said with a small smile, but she appreciates your concern. Later, after Zara had rested and they'd assessed the damage more thoroughly, they rode into Fort Worth to speak with Sheriff Davis. The sheriff listened to their account, particularly interested in Zara's identification of Conway. This matches what we've been suspecting, he confirmed. Conway's been orchestrating these thefts for months, using local troublemakers to do the dirty work while he provides information and handles the selling of the stolen cattle. What will you do? Xavier asked. Now that we have an eyewitness, I can get a warrant to search his property and business records. Davis turned to Zara. Are you certain it was Conway you saw, Mrs. O'Sullivan? Certain enough to testify in court if it comes to that? Zara nodded firmly. I'm certain, Sheriff. I've done business with Conway for years. It was him. 2 days later, Conway was arrested. A search of his property revealed detailed maps of area ranches, schedules of cattle movements, and evidence of large cash transactions that couldn't be explained by his legitimate business. The news spread quickly through the county. Xavier and Zara received visitors throughout the week, neighboring ranchers coming to thank them for their role in stopping the rustling operation. With each retelling, Zara's part in the night's events grew more significant, much to her embarrassment and Xavier's evident pride. You're becoming a legend, he teased one evening as they sat on the porch of the main house, watching the sunset. The lady rancher who outshot the rustlers. Zara laughed, hardly. I just did what needed doing. That's what makes you extraordinary, Xavier said, his expression growing serious. You do what needs doing, regardless of convention or danger. Something in his tone made her heart quicken. Xavier, he took her hand. I've been thinking a lot about the future, Zara, about what I want for this ranch and for my life. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. When I bought this place, I thought I was just purchasing land and cattle. Instead, I found something infinitely more valuable. What did you find? She asked softly, though she knew the answer. You, he said simply, a partner, a woman of strength and courage and determination, a woman I love more deeply than I thought possible. He slid from the chair to one knee before her, still holding her hand. Zara O'Sullivan, will you marry me? Be my wife, my partner in all things. Build a life and a legacy with me. Tears filled her eyes. 6 months ago, she'd been abandoned, betrayed by the man who had promised to love her forever. Now she was being offered a new beginning by a man who had proven his worth through actions, not just words. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you, Xavier Nicholson. His smile was radiant as he rose and pulled her to her feet into his arms. Their kiss was a promise of partnership, of respect, of love freely given and received. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Neighbors came from miles around to witness the union, many curious to see the woman who had helped capture the rustling ring. Zara wore a new blue dress with wild flowers in her hair instead of a veil. Xavier couldn't take his eyes off her throughout the ceremony. The celebration afterward lasted well into the night, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the county. As the party continued around them, Xavier led Zara away from the crowd, toward a small rise where they could see the entire ranch spread out below them. Happy, he asked, his arm around her waist. More than I ever thought possible, she admitted. A year ago, I thought my life was over. Now I realize it was just beginning, our life, he corrected gently. Everything I have is yours now, Zara, not just legally, but in truth. This ranch, my heart, my future, all yours. She turned in his arms to face him. And everything I am is yours, my strength, my love, my trust. Their new life together flourished along with the ranch. With the rustling gang disbanded, the area enjoyed a period of peace and prosperity. Xavier and Zara's partnership proved successful in business as well as loved their cattle operation expanding, their reputation for fair dealing and quality stock spreading throughout Texas. In the spring of 1877, Zara discovered she was expecting their first child. Xavier's joy was boundless. He insisted she reduce her physical work around the ranch, though he knew better than to suggest she stop working entirely. I'm pregnant, not invalid, she reminded him when his protectiveness became too smothering. Women have been having babies while working farms and ranches since the beginning of time. Not my wife, not with my child, he countered stubbornly. At least let Miguel handle the breaking of the new horses. She agreed to that compromise, but continued to oversee much of the day-to-day operations alongside Xavier. Their partnership was a true one, with decisions made together and responsibilities shared according to their strengths. In November, Zara gave birth to a healthy son they named James, after Xavier's brother, who had been lost in the war. As she watched Xavier hold their child for the first time, his eyes filled with wonder and love, Zara felt a completeness she had never known before. He's perfect, Xavier whispered, gently touching the baby's tiny fingers. Thank you for this gift, Zara. Thank you for giving me a life I never dared dream of, she replied, reaching for his hand. News traveled slowly in the West, but eventually reached them even in their happy isolation. Thomas O'Sullivan had abandoned Eliza Harrington in Boston, running off with the daughter of a wealthy merchant. Eliza had returned to Fort Worth, humbled and wiser, to resume her teaching position. When Zara heard this, she felt no satisfaction, only a distant sadness for the woman who had learned the same painful lesson she had. Should we invite her for dinner sometime? Xavier asked, surprising her. She must be lonely. Zara considered this. That's remarkably generous of you. He shrugged. In a way, we owe her our happiness. If she hadn't caught Thomas's eye, you and I might never have met. True enough. Zara smiled at the thought. Yes, let's invite her, Perhaps she can teach James his letters when he's older. Life settled into a pleasant rhythm. The ranch prospered, expanding to nearly twice its original size. James grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. In 1879, he was joined by a sister, Elizabeth, who from her earliest days showed signs of inheriting her mother's strength of will. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, Xavier turned to Zara with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "The way your life turned out." She looked at him in surprise. "Regret? How could I possibly regret this?" She gestured to their home, their children, the prosperous ranch spread out before them. "Sometimes I think about how we met," he explained. "About Thomas leaving you, how devastated you were. I wonder if you ever wish things had been different." Zara took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I used to think Thomas leaving was the worst thing that ever happened to me," she admitted. "Now I know it was the best, not because of the pain. I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but because it led me to you, to this life we've built together." Xavier's expression softened. "You were the gold he gave up," he said, echoing his words from long ago, the most precious thing in his life, and he was too blind to see it. "His loss," Zara said simply. "My gain." She leaned her head against her husband's shoulder, watching as James showed his little sister how to pet a new calf. "Our gain." The sun set slowly over the Texas horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Zara thought about the journey that had brought her here, the betrayal, the pain, the uncertainty, and finally the joy. She had lost a husband but found a true partner. She had lost a ranch but gained a legacy. She had been broken but had rebuilt herself, stronger than before. As darkness fell and Xavier lit the lantern on the porch, Zara looked at the man she loved, the children they had created together, and the home they had built. Thomas had indeed given up gold for dust, but in doing so, he had set her free to find the life and love she truly deserved. And for that, she could almost thank him. 10 years later, the Nicholson Ranch had become one of the most respected cattle operations in Texas. Xavier and Zara's reputation for fair dealing and quality stock extended beyond the state borders, bringing buyers from as far away as Chicago and Kansas City. James, now 13, was his father's shadow, learning every aspect of the ranch business. Elizabeth, at 11, was her mother's daughter, in every way confident, capable, and unafraid to speak her mind. They had been joined by another brother, Michael, now 8, who showed an unexpected talent for working with horses. On the anniversary of their wedding, Xavier surprised Zara with a trip to San Antonio, leaving the children in the capable care of Mrs. Rivera, who had become a permanent fixture at the ranch as their housekeeper. 15 years ago, I was alone, Xavier said as they danced in the grand ballroom of San Antonio's finest hotel. I had land and cattle and money, but nothing that truly mattered. And now, Zara prompted, still beautiful at 41, with silver threads beginning to appear in her dark hair. Now I have everything, he said simply. A wife who is also my best friend, children who make me proud every day, a home filled with love and laughter. Zara smiled, remembering the broken woman she had been when they first met. We've been blessed, she agreed, more than I ever thought possible. Later that night, as they stood on the balcony of their hotel room looking out over the city, Xavier wrapped his arms around her from behind. No regrets, he asked, his breath warm against her ear. Zara turned in his embrace to face him. Not one, she assured him. Every step of the journey, even the painful ones, led me here to you, to our family, to the life we've built together. Then I'm the luckiest man alive, Xavier said, lowering his head to kiss her. And under the Texas stars, surrounded by the legacy of love they had created together, Zara knew that sometimes life's greatest blessings came disguised as its deepest sorrows. What Thomas had thrown away as worthless, Xavier had recognized as priceless. And in that recognition, they had both found the happiness they deserved.